So we've seen lots of new things, lots of communication breakthroughs that were used very effectively. On the other hand, we also saw some traditional aspects of the military that still remain very effective. And we saw those great M1 tanks that can go 60 miles an hour and bring down buildings while they're moving. And we saw those things drive the tip of the spear right through the heart of Iraq, with lots of people coming out with rocket-propelled grenades and other systems trying to take them down and being unsuccessful. So we saw once again the reestablishment of heavy armor as an effective fighting force. And also we saw those great young people on the ground fighting toe-to-toe within 50, 60, 70 yards of the enemy, killing the enemy at close range with rifle fire, the old tradition of the United States Marine Corps. So this is going to be a military that's going to be comprised of some of the old and some of the new technology. It's going to continue to be and will be increasingly technologically effective.
Almost as if on cue, Congressman, as you were talking about the fighting vehicles, President Bush, the commander-in-chief, stepping in front of one of them. He's at United Defense Industries in Santa Clara, California, and he'll be talking about technology and other things about the war. Let's listen in for a moment.
Last month, we witnessed extraordinary events unfold in Iraq. We are very proud of the extraordinary courage and skill of our armed forces. We are particularly proud of the performance of the equipment, much of which we designed and built. We're proud of our employees who participated directly in that conflict. And today, I have the privilege to introduce to you our special guest, who has come here to recognize you for all that you do in the defense of this country. Now, I wish to introduce our President, our Commander-in-Chief, President George W. Bush.
Thanks a lot. Thank you all. Thank you all very much. Thanks for the warm welcome. It's been a heck of a trip out here to California. I'm honored to be here with the good folks at United Defense. I'm here to thank you for your contribution to making the world a more peaceful and free place. Yesterday, I had the honor of speaking to the American people from the deck of the USS Abraham Lincoln. I made this declaration that major combat operations in Iraq have ended. The United States and our allies have prevailed. I spent the night, one night. Most of the crew had been on there for 9.5 months. I was so proud to be with those men and women who wear our nation's uniform. Their morale is high. They have served our nation well, and this country is proud of them. We are proud of everybody who wears the nation's uniform, and we are proud of those who have contributed to the defense of the country, just like the people right here at United Defense have done. The technologies and products developed here at United Defense have made our military second to none. So I'm here to thank the folks who work for this fine company on behalf of the American people for your contribution to the security of your nation and for the peace of the world. I'm also here for another reason. I'm here to talk about the state of our economy. Today we saw some new statistics on employment. The unemployment number is now at 6%, which should serve as a clear signal to the United States Congress we need a bold economic recovery package so people can find work. That 6% number should say loud and clear to members of both political parties in the United States Congress, we need robust tax relief so our fellow citizens can find a job. I want to thank Tom for his kind introduction. I want to thank Elmer for the tour. You all are doing some amazing stuff here. I'm really proud. Proud of the workers, proud of the engineers, proud of the people who are keeping this country on the cutting edge. I want to thank the mayor of Santa Clara for coming. Madam Mayor, I appreciate you coming. I want to thank all the local officials. I particularly want to thank Richard Pombo, the congressman from the great state of California, for being here as well. I had the honor of meeting a fellow named Steve Hout today. Where are you, Steve? Somewhere around here. Where? There he is. Hi, Steve. They gave Steve a great seat. At least a great view. Here's why I want to mention Steve. You see, Steve works for Salesforce.com, a company which encourages volunteerism amongst its employees. Not only does the company encourage volunteerism amongst employees, Steve leads the effort, one of the leaders of the effort. He takes the time that the company allows him and volunteers to help make somebody's life better. We've spent a lot of time in this country over the recent weeks talking about the great military might of America. The truth of the matter is, the greatest strength of our country is the compassion of our fellow citizens to one another. The great strength of America can be found in the hearts of our fellow citizens. My call to you is to love a neighbor just like you'd like to be loved yourself. If you're worried and interested about the future of this country, find somebody who hurts. Find somebody who needs love. Put your arm around him and say the great American experience belongs to you just as much as it belongs to me. Steve, thank you for your leadership. On September the 11th, 2001, America learned that vast oceans no longer protect us from the threats of a new era. On that day, 19 months ago, we also began a relentless worldwide campaign against terrorists, those who hate freedom, in order to secure our homeland and to make the world a more peaceful place. And we're making great progress. In the Battle of Afghanistan, we destroyed one of the most barbaric regimes in the history of mankind. A regime so barbaric they would not allow young girls to go to school. A regime so barbaric they were willing to house Al-Qaeda. That regime no longer exists. Many Al-Qaeda leaders no longer exist, and the training camps no longer exist. In the war on terror, we're making good progress. As I said last night, nearly one half of all Al-Qaeda's senior operatives are no longer a threat to the United States of America. And we're still on the hunt. We will flush them out of their caves, we'll get them on the run, and we will bring them to justice. As a result of the bravery and skill of our armed forces and coalition forces, the war on terror is much longer down the road because of what happened in Iraq. You see, the Al-Qaeda no longer have an ally in the regime in Iraq. Terrorists no longer have a funding source in the regime of Iraq. One thing is certain, terrorists will no longer have a source of weapons of mass destruction in the regime that used to be in Iraq, because the regime that used to be in Iraq is no longer. We have an obligation to future generations of Americans to make sure this country is secure. And we will keep that obligation. We have made progress, but there is more to do. In all these efforts, our men and women in uniform have performed brilliantly. By their courage, our nation is more secure. By their skill and sacrifice, Iraq and Afghanistan are now free. The people who serve our country deserve our gratitude, and they deserve the finest equipment we can provide. The new technologies of war help to protect our soldiers, and as importantly, help protect innocent life. You see, new technologies allow us to redefine war on our terms, which makes it more likely the world will be more free and more peaceful. You do a lot to keep the American Armed Forces on the leading edge of technological change here at United Defense, and I want to thank you for that. You not only help save lives, but you're an agent for peace, and that's important for you to know that. The better we can redefine how wars are fought and won, the more likely it is that peace will prevail, because this is a peaceful nation. This is a nation that wants nothing more than the world to be more free and more peaceful. I want to thank you for what you've done, what you're going to do, and I want to thank you for the product you put out in the field. In the Iraqi theater, the M4 command and control vehicles that you helped produce gave our commanders unprecedented control over the battlefields. The Bradley fighting vehicles were responsible for a lot of tank kills. Some of the first Army units sent to take control of the Baghdad airport were traveling in Bradleys. The world witnessed one of the swiftest advances of heavy arms in the history of warfare, a 350-mile charge from south to north in Iraq through hostile enemy territory. We were able to do so not only because of a good strategy, great courage and skill, but because of the Bradleys and Abrams with which our soldiers were equipped. You're making a good product here. One of the things that people learned about your company as well is how useful the Hercules tank recovery system can be. The guy with the sledgehammer on the statue needed a little help. Thankfully, there was a Hercules close by. A Hercules which pulled that statue of Saddam Hussein to the ground. That meant more to the Iraqi people than you can possibly imagine. It was a symbol of their future, a future based upon something that we hold dear to our hearts, a future based upon something that's not America's gift to the world, but the Almighty God's gift to each and every individual, a future based upon freedom. I also appreciate so very much that 35 of your fellow workers are in theater. Some were in Kuwait, many are in Iraq, working on the products that you helped develop, working through those sandstorms and those long hauls across hostile territory. They're still in the region. They and their families need to know America is grateful for their service and their sacrifices. Just as we are grateful for the service and sacrifice of many of the families whose loved ones have been and still are in theater. Perhaps some of you have got a relative over there, kind of like Ron Pickney, who's an engineer here at United Defense. His son Jason is serving in the 101st Airborne Division. Ron, I appreciate your sacrifice for your country by being a loving dad. But you tell Jason, and you tell Jason to tell his buddies, the Commander-in-Chief and the people of Santa Clara, California are really proud of his service. Major combat operations are over, yet we have got commitments to keep in Iraq. Parts of that country are still dangerous, and we will provide security. We'll establish order in the parts of Iraq that are dangerous. We will chase down the leaders of the old regime, and they will be held account for the atrocious crimes they committed on the Iraqi people. We've got hundreds of sites to exploit, looking for the chemical and biological weapons that we know Saddam Hussein had prior to our entrance into Iraq. Listen, this guy has spent years and years and years of hiding weapons from weapons inspectors. It's going to take time, but the world will see the truth. We'll restore the hospitals, rebuild the schools, provide needed infrastructure in a country that didn't have as many hospitals as it needed, or schools as it needed, or needed infrastructure as was required, because Saddam Hussein was willing to spend money on luxurious palaces, not on the people of Iraq. We will stand with the new leaders of Iraq as they build a government of, by, and for the Iraqi people. This is going to take time. The efforts to restore security and infrastructure is going to take time, and it's not going to be easy work. But we will stay the course. We will stay as long as necessary to get the job done, and then we will leave, and when we leave, we will leave behind a free Iraq. We believe in the peace and keeping the peace. And the best way to make the world more peaceful and the best way to fight hatred, the hateful ideologies oftentimes found in corners of the world, is to promote freedom. Free people are less likely to hate. Free people are more likely to focus on a hopeful future. We love freedom in America. It's ingrained in our soul. But we also understand the habits of freedom are more likely to make the world a more peaceful and hopeful place. We will stay in Iraq until it is free. And we will stay to make sure the foundations for freedom are real and solid. Now, here at home, we've got challenges to face. I mean, I talked about a statistic, but behind every statistic is somebody's life, particularly when it comes to employment statistics. Listen, the goal of this country is to have an economy vibrant enough, strong enough, so that somebody who's looking for work can find a job. We're making progress. You just got to know that we're a growing economy. As a matter of fact, we're of all the industrialized economies, we're one of the strongest. That's not good enough for me, and I know it's not good enough for you. We've come through some hard times. Remember, we've overcome a recession. We've overcome an attack on our soil. We have been in 2 major battles in the war against terror, one in Afghanistan, one in Iraq. We had some of our fellow citizens forget what it means to be a responsible citizen. Some CEOs of corporations in America who felt it would be okay to fudge the numbers, to not tell the truth. Their irresponsible behavior affected the psychology of the country. We'll take care of them. Corporate America. It'd be helpful if many CEOs in corporate America took care of business before we had to take care of them. I call upon the CEOs of this company to treat their employees and shareholders with the utmost of respect. Despite these obstacles, we're growing. But there is untapped potential in this economy. You know it better than anybody right here in this part of the world. The foundations for growth are good. We got low inflation, which is positive, low interest rates, which are really good for people who either own a home or want to buy a home or refinancing a home in order to remodel a home. The greatest strength, oil and gas prices are coming down, which, by the way, is positive for the American consumer and the American people. The greatest strength we have is the productivity of the American worker. That's our greatest strength. Last year, productivity growth in America was 4.8%. It's the best annual increase since 1950. Let me tell you what that means here at United Defense. Incredibly productive workforce that you have here. It took 4 years for United Defense's engineers to develop a working prototype of the Bradley. It took only 8 months to do the same for the Future Combat System vehicle. Yeah! productivity increases like that means that we're more competitive, that people are likely to find better jobs, that consumers will benefit. No, productivity increase is an incredibly important part of the future of this country. And I want to thank the workers here and the engineers here for being on the leading edge of the productivity increases in our country. But the economy is not growing fast enough. And you know it as well as anybody here. So I've been working with the Congress on a jobs package, a pro-growth jobs package. See, in order to help people looking for work, we need to figure out how best to encourage economic growth. That ought to be the cornerstone of any good jobs package. You see, if the economy grows, somebody is more likely to find work. Therefore, we ought to be asking the questions, how do we create economic growth? In my judgment, in the judgment of a lot of economists, and the truth of the matter is, it's now become kind of the common wisdom in Washington, D.C., the best way to create growth is to let people keep more of their own money. The more money you have in your pocket, the more likely it is you're going to demand a good or a service. The more goods and services demanded, the more likely it is somebody is going to find work in America. And therefore, I proposed a robust tax package to the United States Congress of at least $550 billion. The reason I did so is because economists have taken a look at that package and say that when it passes, 1 million new jobs will be created by the year 2004. If you're interested in job creation, if you want to make sure that your neighbor can find work, support a job package that is robust and strong and is hopeful for the American worker. We're making good progress. I mean, it makes sense that we should make progress. After all, most of the tax relief package I propose has already been passed by the Congress. See, I say we ought to reduce all rates. They've already agreed to that. We ought to reduce the effect of the marriage penalty. They agreed to that. We ought to raise the child credit from $600 to $1,000 per child. They agreed to that. The problem is that they weren't going to let you keep your own money for 3, 5, or 7 years from now. Well, listen, our economy needs a shot in the arm now, not 3, 5, or 7 years from now. If you're somebody who's looking for work, you're not interested in what's going to take place 3, 5, or 7 years from now. If you're somebody looking for work, you want your government to act now. For the sake of job creation, the United States Congress must enact all the tax reforms they passed in 2001. When I get back to Washington, D.C., I want to see a bill on my desk that recognizes, well, that may be a little fast. How about in a couple of weeks after I get back to Washington? For the sake of job growth, let's put those tax cuts we've already got in place today so people can find work. Oh, you hear all kinds of talk in Washington about this plan is not fair. You know, this plan is going to reward only certain people. Let me tell you the effects of this plan on a family of 4 making $40,000 a year. Their tax bite will go from $1,178 a year to $45 a year. Now, perhaps for some in Washington, D.C., that $1,000 a year for every year doesn't sound like a lot. But for a family of 4 making $40,000 a year, it means a lot. It means a lot not only to the family, for their capacity to save or invest in their children. It means a lot for our economy to have people with an additional $1,000 in their pocket. Congress needs to get this passed, and get it passed soon. Any good economic jobs package has got to understand the role of small business in our society. Most new jobs are created by small businesses. When small businesses are strong, when small business flourishes, people are more likely to find work. Cutting the tax rates and accelerating the tax rates cuts is important for small business growth for this reason. Most small businesses pay tax at the individual income tax rates. Most small businesses are either a sole proprietorship or a limited partnership or a subchapter S, and therefore pay tax like an individual does, so that when you hear us talk about cutting individual tax rates and accelerating the tax rate cuts, you've got to understand the impact it is going to have on the American entrepreneur. It will mean more capital in the coffers of the small business company. More capital in the coffers of the small business company means more investment. More investment means more work for the American people. $23 small business owners will see their taxes cut. 23 million small business owners will be more likely candidates to hire somebody. As well, there is a limit on what a small business can deduct on capital purchases at $25,000. Congress ought to raise that limit to $75,000 per year for small businesses, to allow small business to exempt capital purchases of that amount. It ought to index it to inflation. Listen, when somebody goes out and buys a new computer or a new program, it not only benefits the small business because the small business becomes more productive, it benefits the computer programmer who's designed the program or the computer manufacturer who made the computer. The best way to encourage economic growth is to encourage investment, is to stimulate supply and demand. The Congress needs to be bold, and the Congress needs to act, and the Congress needs to recognize the importance of small business in our society. I also believe we ought to end the double taxation on dividends. It makes sense to tax a company's profits. What doesn't make sense is to tax the company's profits and then tax the owners of the company after they pay tax. It's not fair to tax something twice in our society. Who are the owners of the companies? The owners of the companies are the shareholders. Millions of Americans own stock either directly or through pension plans, 401ks. Listen, if you're an owner of a company, small or large, you ought to be worried about your company, your investment being taxed twice by the federal government. The double taxation of dividends is not fair. It is not fair to seniors who oftentimes rely upon dividend income. It's not fair to the workers whose pension plans rely upon dividend income. It is not fair for the federal government to tax something twice. And we need to get rid of the double taxation of dividends in America. Getting rid of the double taxation of dividends will make it easier for businesses to raise capital. It'll reduce the cost of capital. The more capital there is in circulation, the more jobs there will be for American workers. Getting rid of the double taxation of dividends will encourage companies to pay dividends. We have just gone through a period in American economic history where people invested based upon what I would call maybe pie in the sky projections. That don't worry, we don't have any cash flow, but nevertheless we've got a nice story. The problem is that story kind of ran out of steam because there wasn't any cash flow. To me, it's a great reform to encourage people to pay dividends on stocks, because you can't put out a pie in the sky projection if you're a dividend paying company. If you say you're going to pay a dividend, you better pay the dividend. And the only way you can pay a dividend is to have actual cash flow available for the investors. Getting rid of the double taxation of dividends will be good for job creation. It'll be good for capital formation. It'll be good for the pension holders of America. And it will be good corporate reform in a system that needed reform. I know there's people hurting here in Silicon Valley. I know there are people who are worried about their future. I know this incredibly vibrant part of the American economy over the past years is not meeting its full potential. The plan I just outlined is one that will boost the economy in the Silicon Valley. It's a plan that is bold because we need a bold plan. It's a plan that is thoughtful because we need a thoughtful plan. Most importantly, it's a plan that will invigorate the entrepreneurial spirit, which has been so strong here, and make it more likely somebody who's looking for a job will be able to find one. I urge the United States Congress to look at the unemployment numbers that came out today and pass a tax relief plan that will matter. A tax relief plan robust enough so that the people of this country who are looking for work can find a job. I know you'll hear talk about the deficit, and we've got a deficit because we went through a recession. A recession means the economy has slowed down to the extent where we're losing revenues to the federal treasury. We got a recession because we went to war, and I said to our troops, if we're going to commit you into harm's way, you deserve the best equipment, the best training, the best possible pay. It doesn't matter what it costs. We're going to pay what it costs in order to win the war. We had an emergency. These all cost our government money. So with the combination of the loss of revenue as a result of the recession, which was official in January of 2001, and the expenditures in order to win a war and deal with an emergency and deal with the new issues of homeland security, we've got a deficit. And there's two ways to deal with that. One is you control the expense side of the ledger. You make sure the federal government spends your money on that which is absolutely necessary. You focus them on doing certain things and doing them well. You must have fiscal discipline in Washington, D.C. in order to deal with the deficit. And the other way to deal with the deficit is to put policies in place that increase the revenues coming into the Treasury. And the best way to encourage revenues coming into the Treasury is to promote policy which encourages economic growth and vitality. A growing economy is going to produce more revenues for the federal Treasury. The way to deal with the deficit is not to be timid on the growth package. The way to deal with the deficit is to have a robust enough growth package so we get more revenues coming into the federal Treasury, and then follow my lead and make sure we don't overspend the people's money in Washington, D.C. I'm incredibly proud of this country, and I know you are as well. We have been through a lot as a nation. Our resolve has been tested. But we have shown the world our greatest resources and our greatest strength, which is our national character. That we hold certain values to be true. That we've got tremendous compassion as a nation. That we're an optimistic people. And we're resolved people. We are resolved to defend the peace of the world. That we are resolved to bring freedom to corners of the world that haven't seen freedom in generations. That we're determined to build the prosperity of our own country. This is a unique moment in our country's history, truly is. And the American people are rising to meet it. I want to thank each of you for what you've done to make this country more secure and the world more peaceful and the world more free. I want to thank you for coming out today. It's such an honor to be here. May God bless you and your families, and may God continue to bless America.
The Commander-in-Chief, the President of the United States, George W. Bush, at United Defense Industries in Santa Clara, California, the Silicon Valley. This is the factory where those Bradley fighting vehicles were made, and these were troop movers that played such a crucial role in the war on terror. And this is a president very eager to say that just as we prevailed in the war in Iraq, so too will we prevail in the war on strengthening our economy.
Exactly. The speech was touted as being about the economy, but obviously there was an opportunity for him to talk about what seems to be his #1 topic these days, the military, since he was, as you mentioned, at this factory that makes these fighting vehicles.
But at the same time, this was really the first time since the beginning of the war in Iraq that the president spent such a considerable amount of time talking about the economy. He began his speech by mentioning a statistic that was out today from the Employment Department, that unemployment rate is at 6%. He said the U.S. economy is doing okay. It needs to do a lot better, and he has laid out an economic stimulus plan to make that happen. Wendell Goler is standing by right now. He is outside the building where the president was just speaking. And Wendell, this is a president that was eager to show that he can tackle with enthusiasm and vigor domestic issues as well as international issues.
Well, the president gave himself a military backdrop to do so, and with polls indicating that his approval rating is starting up again with the tailing off of the war in Iraq, it's not surprising he would do so. This is, in fact, the second week in a row the president has used a defense establishment as the backdrop for an economic speech. Last week in Lima, Ohio, at the factory that builds the Abrams M1A tanks, the president also pushed his economic stimulus package. He did so again today here at the factory that builds the Bradley fighting vehicles, and one of the stars of this show was the Hercules tank retrieval system, which of course pulled down the statue of Saddam Hussein in central Baghdad, a moment the president said was tremendously important for the people of Iraq. Mr. Bush is attempting to turn the nation's focus away from the war in Iraq, which he won't say is over, but which he is all but claiming victory for, and refocus the nation's attention on the economy. But he is very clearly using the military, using the war to do so. And it's not surprising, of course. That is where a great deal of the strength of the president's public approval comes from, the success in the war in Iraq and his foreign policy endeavors. But Mr. Bush is a bit in the lion's den here when he talks about the economy. Of course, Silicon Valley hurt very much by the recession and the sluggish economy over the past several years. The president telling the crowd here that if Congress will pass his economic stimulus package, which includes a provision that would end the taxation of the dividends that stockholders pay, that it would help the economy even here in Silicon Valley. Back to you.
Wendell Goler in Santa Clara, California. Wendell, thanks.
And this is a Fox News alert, a disturbing warning coming today from the Department of Homeland Security. And our own Major Garrett is live at the Pentagon with details on it. Hi, Major.
Good afternoon, Patty. And here's what Fox News has confirmed. The Department of Homeland Security has issued a new advisory this week, very recently, to the general aviation community throughout the United States and to local governments, asking them to be extra vigilant for any possible terrorist attack involving an airplane of some kind. Now, the Reuters news agency, this is something that Fox News has not confirmed, but the Reuters news agency is quoting from what it says is this very same advisory that has very specific information, completely unrelated to a possible attack in the United States, but related to one in Pakistan. Let me read to you what this Reuters dispatch says. It quotes what it says is from this Homeland Security advisory, quote, recent reliable reporting indicates that al-Qaeda was in the late stages of planning an aerial suicide attack against the U.S. consulate in Karachi. Karachi, a major city in southern Pakistan. Now, there are a couple of things that have occurred this week that might lead some credence to this heightened state of alert in Karachi. What are they? Well, a Pakistani raid on Tuesday captured a very significant member of al-Qaeda. What is his name? Walid Ba-Atash, described by senior defense officials and other U.S. officials very familiar with counterintelligence operations as one of the top 7 remaining operatives within al-Qaeda. 5 others linked to al-Qaeda were also arrested by Pakistani officials. One of them, a nephew of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, also a very high-ranking operative within al-Qaeda. That all happened on Tuesday. There has been a good deal of intelligence since then that al-Qaeda operatives in Pakistan have been using Karachi as a base of operations. And in these raids on Tuesday, 300 pounds of explosives were found, detonating devices, and other evidence that Pakistani officials and U.S. intelligence officials have confirmed this subsequently, indicated that an attack of some kind appeared to have been being planned by those al-Qaeda operatives in Pakistan. Now, these so far, at least officially, are unrelated circumstances. The specific language talking about a potential attack from the skies at the U.S. consulate in Karachi, and this earlier raid this week nabbing some significant al-Qaeda operatives, but the two things seem to be very circumstantially linked, at least. Here's what Fox News has confirmed, reporting from the top again, that the Department of Homeland Security has issued a new advisory to the general aviation community in America, as well as all local governments, alerting them to be extra vigilant on matters of security, not making any specific reference to any potential attacks from the sky. But this Reuters news agency dispatch does say something very specific about a possible aerial attack at the U.S. consulate in Karachi. Patty Ann, that's what we know.
All right.
Back to you in New York.
Disturbing information. Major Garrett, live at the Pentagon. Thank you.
Joining us once again from Washington is Congressman from California, Duncan Hunter, who has been with us for quite some time as we watch those troops get off the USS Abraham Lincoln. He joins us once again. And I'm wondering, Congressman, if you could just sort of address this story that's crossing on the Reuters news service right now. There are still some major problems in Pakistan, are there not?
Well, I think it's very clear, not just in Pakistan, but this is going to be a very dangerous century, and terrorism can be anything from a military operation, large scale, down to a very small scale operation that involves a plane or a couple of planes, as we've seen in the United States, or vehicles, and so. Very clearly, we're going to continue to see al-Qaeda, even as it's drawn down and it's some of its leaders are taken by the United States. We're going to see the remnant attempt to strike back, and it's been a surprise to lots of folks that they haven't effectively been able to strike back, to make that counterpunch that's been expected over the last many months. But very clearly, with respect to aircraft being used, the al-Qaeda impressed itself very clearly with the strike on the United States, where so much leverage was gained by using an aircraft full of fuel and passengers to destroy parts of America and thousands of Americans. And I'm sure that message has remained with them and is one that they would love to duplicate. But we have now in place a much more robust military operation around the world, and also a much more robust intelligence system. And hopefully this intelligence system can pick up these acts before they come to fruition and head them off. And actually hundreds and hundreds of incidents or potential incidents are reported on a fairly regular basis, and there's lots of things that are prevented that the American people never know about. But very clearly, this is going to be a dangerous century, and we're going to have more incidents like this. And what we have to do is try to stop them before they get started. And one thing we have to do is make sure that our intelligence system is rebuilt. And that means that there's no substitute for when a terrorist organization is planning an operation. There's no substitute for having an agent in the room who knows what's happening, who hears about it, and can go back and report to our intelligence people and allow us to take preventive action before that act comes to fruition.
Congressman, this report apparently comes because of some information that was obtained by the Department of Homeland Security, which has only been up and running for a couple of months now. How do you feel knowing that this brand new department that mixes a lot of people and a lot of different intelligence agencies is already able to get some hardened intelligence on the table that is bringing about these new warnings?
Well, actually, I don't know where the raw data came from with respect to this. I know it's been reported that the Department of Homeland Security has put out the warning with respect to our aviation community. But very clearly, what we've done is we've eliminated these so-called stovepipes, and that is situations where one agency was reluctant to talk to another agency. People know now that this strong leader in the White House, President Bush, and Tom Ridge and the folks that are under him are going to be come down hard on any leader in the intelligence communities who withholds information or doesn't move it very quickly. But we have a very efficient system. We have lots of smart people, very creative people, and now a lot more resources going into intelligence gathering. So our intelligence apparatus is going to get stronger from here on out, and it's going to be easier for us to prevent actions like this, the one we're talking about right now, from happening before they come to fruition. But once again, Americans, I think, have to be resolved to this century being a very dangerous century.